Bonjour everyone, I am Anne-Lise Cailliez and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. My name is Anne-Lise Cailliez and I am your host. And today we are having our third season on mental health. And we have 3 guests and I'm super excited to have them because I've never had so many guests on the show. There's also a man. So my 3 guests, it's a ménage à 3 or really ménage à 4. So we have today Teresa Castillo, Ann Niles, and Jason Walter. Anne, could you share a little bit about your background with the audience today, just discovering you?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Ann Niles. I'm a psychologist in New Jersey. I have a private practice and also in New York City. I work with adults, maternal mental health, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, really diverse issues, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Amazing, Anne. So good to have you. Now, Jason, in your own words, could you introduce yourself as well to our audience?
Yeah, I'm Jason Walter. I have a private practice in New York City that I've had since 2016. I work primarily with adults. I do some couples work. And as an owner of a group practice, I do a fair amount of supervision for early career clinicians as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Jason. And Dr. T, who's been on the podcast before. Nice to have you here again. In your own words, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. I'm Dr. T. I have a practice next to Bryant Park. I'm a New York City psychologist. I work with adults with anxiety in high pressure work environments. So pretty much everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. T. And thank you again to the 3 of you for coming on the show today. So my first question is, mental health outcomes are getting worse, even though more people are in therapy than ever. Each of you represent a totally different vision for where this field should go. So what's broken? What's missing? Let's get a quick take from each of you.
It's a big question, and I notice it myself with people that I work with, people that I know personally. What's broken is our system in the US, for one, in terms of the support that we give to people who need services. Not a lot of insurance coverage, things like that. It's really not prioritized. I think it's a system that keeps people sick and on medications that don't often work. So we don't do a lot of preventative work here. We really need to be supporting people in mental health first and in preventative care first. So that, in my opinion, plus the pace of life now, thanks to smartphones, which have made us all just scramble and run around like crazy and, dumb it down now with some AI, no offense to the AI. But yeah, we're going at the speed of light without a seatbelt.
Jason, what is your take?
Yeah, it's a very big question. I think it's kind of important to think about, I think that there are some indicators that mental health in general is getting worse. But what I find interesting is that this is also not a good thing. The outcomes in psychotherapy have been largely flat for many decades now. So it's not exactly getting worse, but the statistics would show that we're not exactly getting better at treating people. And then you have certain mental illnesses having more prevalence in the population over time. But as much as we may represent different takes on the mental health field, I agree with Anne on that these are systemic issues rather than, I think there are some systemic issues within the field of psychotherapy, but I think there's systemic issues about the culture that we live in and the way specifically that we pay for this work, for healthcare in general, including mental health care. So it's a really big question that kind of pulls at almost every aspect of the way that we live, in my opinion.
Dr. T?
So I feel like a lot of it is therapy is inaccessible and also inconsistent, oftentimes reactive. So people are coming in when it's really too late, meaning too late. Don't get me wrong, too late. Too late meaning there's just been so much added, right? And the last straw has landed on the person's back and they're coming in. Often that's what I see, especially for people seeking therapy and more specifically couples therapy, which I don't do, just as an aside. But the inaccessibility and inconsistency just creates this dynamic for both parties to not really get into. I think what's missing is early detection, scalability support, something that is available 24/7. And we are definitely getting into that a little bit later, but in the sense of something that is reliably available in the times of need. And that's just not happening now.
And I'd like to dive now into each of your profiles, because the three of you here have really three different approaches. And I'd like to start with Anne and psychedelics. So Anne, why is this a fundamental shift and not just another treatment option?
So the use of psychedelic or psychedelic-like medicines, such as ketamine, which is the one that is currently legal in New York and New Jersey that I'm practicing, the shift is looking at trauma-informed care first and foremost. And most people suffer from trauma, even if it's, as we call it, little t trauma. Things that have happened throughout their lives that have gotten stuck and are creating symptoms, that we call anxiety, depression, OCD, you name it, substance use disorders. So this work is very different, again, from this systemic take of, take pill, sort of mask symptoms, keep moving forward. But it's sort of getting to the root of things and looking at, and it doesn't have to be trauma specifically, but any symptoms that people are dealing with. But what we tend to find is that our bodies keep the score, as the book says, and that people really do hold these things in their subconscious and in their bodies. And so a lot of these negative symptoms that people are experiencing are caused by old stuff, right? That we have this miswiring that could have happened when you were 3, it could have happened when you were 13, it could have happened last week. And so these sort of misfirings and miswirings in the brain and the body are what we call symptoms of mental health. And so this is a real shift because it creates a neuroplasticity and a shift in how neurotransmitters talk to one another that can create a lot of positive change. And so it's getting to the root of this versus just taking a pill and sort of masking that, or, drinking alcohol or whatever people are doing to sort of numb that or push that away.
Amazing. That's fascinating. So unlike traditional therapy with weekly sessions that can go for months, for years, you're doing something radically different, right? So could you walk us through what it's like, both clinically, economically, and describe us the process?
Yeah, I mean, some people who've done this work, and I've done the work as a client, and I do it as a professional, will tell you it's when you get to a point of feeling stuck or burnt out, or just that things are not helping, it's often really helpful. It's very different in that, and it would be described as 100 therapy sessions in one. And that's not to say, and I don't advocate for people just taking a substance on their own, or even necessarily just going to a ketamine IV clinic or getting something in the mail without the preparation for what is going to happen. So preparation sessions are really important. The safety of a dosing session, which you might have if you're at a clinic, but the integration after the dosing session is the most critical piece to this. You've created this clean slate sort of neuroplasticity, and things have come to the surface. And not just the content of what comes up in a dosing session or psychedelic session, but what you were working on in therapy. So we set intentions. if somebody's working on, let's say, depressive symptoms, right? They're not feeling good about themselves. They're feeling lonely. They're feeling lethargic. Those are the intentions that they're working towards, even in traditional talk therapy. But how we go about that is we're asking, a medicine, right? In this case, ketamine, which is a synthetic medicine, which is why it is safe, easily dosed. It can be safe with a lot of other medications. And so we're using it the way that indigenous and native healers around the world have used plant medicines for a very, very long time. And there's a wisdom to that work where people can experience something that shifts the way they experience themselves. It's how they experience themselves in this life, in this body, in this world. And that can create a shift for them and their perspective, which just talking about that in talk therapy is not always possible, right? If you're working with somebody in therapy for months and years and they just can't see another perspective, it's really hard to do that work. And I did that work for a really long time. I still do that work because not everybody is open to this way of working, but I will say you can have a rigidity there that is hard to shift at times, regardless of how you're working with them. And so in this case, you can create a real experiential shift in the body where somebody can feel something, for example, joy that maybe they haven't felt since childhood. And so they don't even recognize it. They don't know how to feel that. And so once that comes into the body and they can have that experience, then we can talk about it, right? And it's not just in that moment, it's that then you have a neuroplasticity in the mind and in your nervous system that we can integrate into your everyday life. And so I've seen real significant change in that way.
Oh, this is fascinating. I loved hearing you talking about that. And thank you for sharing. Amazing, Anne. Now, Jason, besides being the first man on the podcast, could you share with us a bit more about what ACT is and why you moved from psychoanalysis to ACT and what prompted it?
Yeah, I started my career being really interested in psychoanalytic and psychodynamic types of approaches, I guess, a classical approach, what people would imagine psychotherapy looks like, coming out of Freud and all of that. What happened was I, over the years, kind of found that although the work that I was doing with people, which was sometimes, more than once a week for an extended period of time in my own work in analysis, that was also multiple times per week, though it was interesting, it often didn't seem like it was producing much in terms of change in the client. And in my own experience in treatment, the things that really felt impactful for me were, ironically, when the therapist deviated, let's say, from the standard way of how you're supposed to do psychoanalysis. Not that is any one given thing. So I started to sprinkle in more evidence-based practice into my already existing, casework, and found that in very short order, I started seeing change in the symptoms that people were presenting. But even more interesting than that, it seemed to deepen the treatment even from a psychoanalytic perspective. From that moment, I really started to feel a pull toward more modern, more evidence-based types of interventions. And in that process, I found acceptance and commitment therapy, which is sort of built on something called functional analysis. That's something. Radical behaviorism is another sort of piece of jargon that people throw out there. The thing that I really like about ACT and functional analysis is that instead of it being a specific modality, that is, you do this and then you do that and then people get better from X, Y, or Z set of symptoms, ACT really is trying to be a framework from which to explain what makes good therapy work, which means that even if someone's coming, like me, from a psychoanalytic background, you get a framework from which to understand how some aspects of even psychoanalytic work, or for that matter, ketamine-assisted therapy, how that can be valuable. From there, you get, I think, a really flexible model that can respond to the context that the client is bringing. And I think this is something maybe we'll talk more about later, but also a really strong conceptualization about what it means to have relative mental health or right, lack thereof, that instead of it being about symptom presentation per se, it's about trying to understand what a person wants from their life. What is a life well lived for that person? And in what ways are they not doing that? And I found that a really edifying way of thinking about this work is instead of saying, hey, you're thinking a little too much about this, or you hand wash just a little too much. Instead of looking at it like that, I can ask, what is a good life what would a life that you want to live look like? And how can we work together to help you have that life? That to me is the most impactful, most easily understood way of understanding this work. And ACT, I think, was the first sort of treatment approach or framework that I saw that really laid that out in a clear way. But the thing about it that I think is really cool is that it can be used in conjunction, or it can be added on, a layer that can be added on to any type of treatment, anything at all. The functional analytic piece of it is that it's essentially whatever works, right? It's understanding what it means to work, but that if a totally new out of left field treatment came up and we see that it's working and it's helping people live better lives by their measure, then that's part of the game too, right? That could be ketamine assisted therapy. It could be AI assisted therapy, but it gives us a framework to even understand that question to begin with. What is working and what does it mean for therapy to make an impact?
Amazing. Thank you, Jason. And Dr. T, Teresa, now about you. So you've said multiple times in our conversations that you think therapists will be replaced by AI. What problem does AI actually solve? Countertransference, memory issues, what else? What is on your mind?
Well, a lot of system failures. So first of all, it would be consistency and availability, right? And to be fair to myself, I'm thinking more future focus, not like chat of today, 2026 or whatever year this is airing. But in the future, at some point, I feel like it has the ability to really look at the system failures, starting with consistency and availability. Being 24/7 is something that actually Freud believed in. I went to school for forensic psychology and I fell in love with Freud and went clinical. And then, yada, 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 I do ACT now. Mm-hmm. Same. Yeah. And I feel like both of the leaders of both of these approaches, psychoanalysis and ACT, they both believe that the therapist and maybe not the human should be available to patients 24/7. Why? Because stuff happens at 3 a.m., right? And no human is going to be available, 24/7. It's just impossible, right? And when those moments come that are critical or crisis or rumination or impulsivity or whatever the case is, right? There's that gap of accessibility and availability. Now, you did mention countertransference. Was that you or was it me just now? Well, one of us mentioned countertransference, and I
did
feel
I
like
mention countertransference?
Someone
I don't know.
I don't know if it was a part of the question, but whatever. The countertransference, I feel like is a interesting one because we're bringing in our stuff, like I'm bringing in the fact that I'm a woman. I'm bringing in the fact that I'm Hispanic. I'm an immigrant. I'm queer. I'm this, I'm that. And I'm bringing that to the chair and inside the room. AI isn't going to be bringing that, right? Like it's not muddied by the humanness, right? Whether it's blind spots, biases, I like some patients more than I like other patients. And that has to do with, who I work with better, who understands me, who who's doing things outside of the 1 hour a week? I'm not doing 3 hours a week for sure. So like there's all of those components that aren't going to be there. I mean, memory. I will say that I have an excellent memory, but I won't remember every single thing that you will ever say. So there's
That's
that.
rude. That's just rude.
And then like pattern recognition, right? So like I can recognize patterns. I'm seeing them. I'm seeing what is the past interfering with the present. What has happened in a person's past that is coming up now and all of these other things. But that might just get so much easier with AI, linguistics, patterns that come across, even if they're measuring certain arousal levels in real time and things like that, where we just can't do that, right? And scalability. So being able to scale the resources, no more wait lists, no more, cost stuff. I mean, a lot of therapy also has to do with psychoeducation, skill building, and things like that. Narrative restructuring that can be done with a future AI that is not here yet, but I feel hopeful about some of that being outsourced to that, because I feel like it's a great idea.
Thank you, T. Now, here's the interesting tension. Anne, you need human therapists for psychedelic work. T, you're thinking in the future we can possibly even eliminate them. Jason, you're focused on therapist-guided action. So do these visions coexist, or are they sort of competing? Whoever wants to answer that first. Anne?
I've got things to say.
Coming in hot.
I can appreciate very much what Jason and Dr. T shared. And what comes to mind for me is at the end of the day, and in any crisis, and when it really comes down to it, it's about human contact and connection. And that is about energy. And so not all of our work is about that. There are things that I'm sure we all do where we've had clients who say, I just need strategies, right? I need help with structure and I need tools, right? And those things are important. And those things I find AI and technology can be really, really beneficial in that way for reasons that Dr. T mentioned, like consistency, any time of day, right? You're not paying for that, maybe going into a therapy office every time. But I think, in the work that I'm doing, everything that you've both talked about and so many other therapeutic techniques and frameworks can tie into this. So I work from an internal family systems framework. You can work from an ACT framework. You can work from a cognitive behavioral, whatever it is that you use in your toolbox and that you teach your clients are all amazing. It's sort of how are we conceptualizing what's going on for the client? We're still doing that. How are we teaching them strategies? We're still doing that. But the piece that I think that the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy really adds is creating that neuroplasticity, right? That space for change, that opening, and that unburdening of so much that is being held, right? You can teach someone strategies, but if they can't get past the debilitating anxiety or depression to use those skills, it's Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, in my opinion. So I just think that and it's not right for everybody and in every situation. But I think these can all complement each other. And I do think there's definitely a human element that I hope we can really keep in this world. I really hope we can keep the human element to healing work. I do.
Thank you, Anne. Now, real talk about economics. Therapy is already inaccessible for most people. Does any of your approach actually solve that? Or are we just creating better options for people who can already afford care?
Come on. You're talking to me. I mean, I feel like we should be talking about scalability just because there's a higher demand on therapy. Part of it is there are more people seeking out therapy because it's been destigmatized, or there have been attempts to bring awareness to mental health over the years, and yada, yada. Part of that match and being able to meet everyone's needs should be scalability, and also be reasonably priced for people to have the care that they need, because it's important. It matters. Everyone should have access to it. And the 24/7 piece, I'm not going to harp on it, you know?
And so what should we keep from traditional psychology as we move forward, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's so much there. I will say, again, right, my sense, and from where I'm coming from, if something works, right, then great, fantastic. If in the future an AI comes out and it truly, in every way, in every measurable sense, can help people as well or better than humans can, there really won't be an argument to be made at that point, right? I mean, if it's 24/7 availability, it's much cheaper. We won't even really need to be having this debate, because it simply will replace us right off the bat. I can't speak to that, because that theoretical future where AI is able to do things in the same way that we can, I don't know that we even know what that looks like. I will say, though, just something that Teresa mentioned, that idea of countertransference. It's really interesting. This actually comes from the psychoanalytic world as well, but there is some writing and research in the ACT world as well to talk about that. This idea of countertransference, this idea that therapists bring their own selves and their own biases and their own their own emotional baggage into the room, feel that it's a common misconception that countertransference is only a bad thing. And I think this is really interesting, and it may speak to something that AI may never really be able to do. It may be able to simulate it, but can't really do it, which is, if I'm coming into a session and I have a bias, I have a feeling, the way that I respond to that feeling outwardly to my client is modeling what they will do with their internal thoughts and feelings when those come to bear in other situations. So having a place for countertransference and that discussion when it's appropriate can be really powerful. Does it ever make sense to say, "Hey, I don't like you. I'm just always angered and annoyed when I'm talking to you." That's not going to be probably very useful. But being able to say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with something here. I feel a little distracted by it, but I want to be here, and I'm still here to help you. I'm committed to that. But I'm wondering, do you have any sense of where that's coming from?" Or some question like that. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. That can be a really powerful moment in the treatment. Now, when an AI does that, now again, maybe this new AI will essentially just be like a person. It does have feelings and all of that, and it can model it. Then it won't matter. But if it's a simulation of that, it will fundamentally change those statements and that context. Because if a machine is saying that, everyone will say, "Okay, well, this is just they're not really having this feeling. They're just making a demonstration." Whereas when we're doing it in real time. We're saying, "I'm having an experience right now that you might have in the future. And here's me trying my best with it," right? That can be really powerful for what it's worth. But to answer your question about the economics of it, I think the economics of it go deeper than psychotherapy in general. I mean, the cost of everything and the need to provide for oneself in a context where it's not just a threat of thriving or not thriving financially, but life and death, even for us therapists, costs become what they are. And to incentivize people to go into the field, take on liability, take on the responsibility of this work, it ends up being expensive. Should it be so expensive? Absolutely not. But to say that that's just a problem with psychotherapy in general would be missing that it's part of a larger context that I think doesn't really work in general. And again, though, if AI comes along and is able to replace us cheaply, then that will be an obvious move. Or ketamine assisted therapy. I don't think, Anne, you're saying that ketamine replaces other types of psychotherapy per se, but if it could, and people could go in 2 sessions, and again, I know that's not what you're saying, but if they could, I would be the first person to say, "Okay, well, there we go. We got it." So yeah, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Jason. And now the last question for all of you. Are we actually making people better, or just helping them be more comfortable with their problems. What's the real goal here?
That's rough.
I know I just spoke, but I have some big thoughts about that. This is a big thing about ACT, by the way. This is like one of the big questions, right? And the answer to it is really counterintuitive, might even sound kind of absurd. But in functional analysis, in ACT, right, the idea of helping someone or making someone feel so-called better, that is, feel more pleasant feelings around anything, is specifically and explicitly not the goal. What we're hoping to do is help people be more adaptive among all the types of feelings that can come up. So if a therapy is aiming, and we all can get kind of, because it's very natural and human to, when someone's in pain, to want to help relieve them of that pain. It's just built in. And so it happens. That aim will happen momentarily in every therapy. But we don't want to stay there too long, because ultimately the way we're helping people is to say, hey, you have pain right now. There's a discomfort. There's something really powerful going on inside. And if we take a stance that in itself is a bad thing, then we miss an opportunity to be bigger, to live larger, more robust lives. As we approach difficult things, those difficult feelings come up. And when difficult feelings come up, it presents an opportunity to practice showing up and being present for that, and to do what you really wish to do with your life. So I would say, to directly answer your question, we really ought not be just trying to get people to be more comfortable with their problems. If anything, and I know this sounds contradictory, to make someone more comfortable with something that is a problem, insofar as they could change things around that problem, would be doing them a disservice. If I have a problem, it's a good thing that I'm uncomfortable with it. If I stub my toe, as much as it hurts, as much as I don't like that feeling, it's a good thing that it hurts, because there are people who have neuropathy, who have conditions where they lose sensation in their extremities. They'll stub their toe, they don't know it, and they'll actually get gangrene. They can lose limbs because of this. The pain itself, as much as it hurts, as much as it is not wanted, is not the thing we're aligned against. It's, what do I do to respond to that pain?
I love that. I love that approach.
Well, to not be argumentative, because I know you wanted us to go into fight mode or whatever, but yeah, I do agree.
There's not a ton of clash here.
Right. I do agree with both of you, Anne and Jason, because part of the essence of the work can really be the human touch, right? The depth of it, the modeling, the attachment styles, the being in the room with another human that can co-regulate the ruptures in the relationships, and how do you come back from that rupture, right? All of that happens human to human. And that is where AI would fall short. It wouldn't be that we would disappear. It would be that we would have to specialize and do CAP groups and do things that are uniquely kind of going towards the human attachment relationship perspective. I mean, the field itself does have a tendency to cling to outdated models and super underestimates our ability to be adaptable and psychologically flexible. Part of that is a lot of the things that are happening nowadays are changing way faster than we can adapt to. But within that, we have to make strides as a field to try to keep up, like we can't just decide that, we've done this forever, this is what works, right? But today is very different from 100 years ago, where all of these things got started. So I don't think that human therapists are going to evaporate. I just feel like there is an avenue for a specialization or a specialty, and that could be very human and depth oriented and modeling and relational and attachment.
Anne?
Yeah, I would say in response to everything that both of you said, I mean, what's beautiful about the I'll just stay with the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, but psychedelic-assisted therapies in general, as they're being studied more, is all of those things you just talked about. You know, we've trained, we continue our education in these areas, and we've been like the experts in this. In internal family systems, just like many of these frameworks, we trust that the person themselves, their true self, their essence, that sometimes has gotten lost, right? It's been defended against for so long. It's so protected that people are not able to drop in and sort of feel that anymore. And so with ketamine, for example, people are really able to go to that place. And it's not scary and it's not sad, even if they're crying or they're expressing those things. That's sort of uncovering, right? That's moving these defenses aside. And so we don't have to be these experts who know everything. We're just being with them as guides and facilitators as they come back to this place that they know it's at their core, right? Their true self just is emerging naturally, because these ego defenses, these protections that we've built up, just sort of step aside really naturally. So we can go for weeks in psychotherapy, and I was trained psychodynamically as well, and, was analyzing and doing all this work and figuring out what was going on for them and trying to help them understand that or come to that themselves. It just naturally, I still see it in those frameworks that I was working from, but I don't have to do all of that. It just emerges for them. It's, they suddenly empathize with a mother who they've been angry at for 40 years. And to see that differently, to feel that differently, that creates the change. So it's kind of amazing.
So, Anne, where can people find you?
My website is Dr. Ann Niles, so it's DrAnnNiles.com, or on Psychology Today. You can do a search for, I do individual ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in New York and New Jersey. I'll also be offering groups starting in February and in New York and New Jersey, and I'm collaborating with different practitioners who are running retreats, and I'm going to be co-facilitating for some retreats. So please get in touch.
Amazing.
We'd love to talk more about it.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hi, my website is pivotpsychologicalservices.com. You could find me on Psychology Today as well. I'm on ZenCare. I'm on all the things now, which is new and exciting. I have a book launch at the end of January. So that's coming up soon. I'm putting my memoir out into the world. I have some other writing projects that will be happening towards the end of 2026, hopefully. So I'll have that.
Great. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yay.
Wow. Yeah. Congrats.
Thank you. And I'll have all of the things updated with all of that. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, T. And Jason?
Jason Walter, you can find me on Psychology Today and send me a message directly or reach out directly, or you can send an email to my admin team at info@sohotherapyny.com. But either way, I will get the message.
Amazing. Thank you so much to the three of you for coming on the show today. It was really fun to have you. I wish there had been a little bit more blood and tears, the usual. But I guess, people in the mental health space don't really fight, huh? Not so much violence. But thank you so much.
You have to give us more time.
Yeah.
Okay, more violence. I see how we
That's right.
Yeah,
we need to get comfortable.
Thank you again. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I can't wait to join you again next week. Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. see you next week, and you've got this.